Hey everybody, welcome back to Shock and Schlock. I'm your host, Herschel Gillis, and today I'm going to be doing the follow-up to my first Jörg Bucharest review of Nekromantik with a second review. Part 2 of 4 of the Jörg Bucharest reviews with Nekromantik 2. The strangely sometimes looked down upon sequel to the first one. Didn't know that this one was less favorably looked upon than the first entry, until I started looking at other people's reviews a while back. But yeah, this one is certainly a tonal shift from the first one. The first one is very much a, black comedy, more not quite lighthearted, but lighter than this. This is, it's much more serious. The woman from the first film makes a return, as does the man in a new capacity, of course. But the thing with this one is it has a much deeper story. That being that, well, much deeper is relative, but deeper storyline is that we get a new character who the woman from the first film begins to date. She has a day job as a nurse. The man has a day job dubbing adult films. Both of these are shown a couple of times. They strike up a romance, and it sort of follows the woman trying to deal with her desires that were shown in the first film, sort of going along with her new romance, and her trying to balance that. The dating and storyline of this, the relationship that the two leads have, is pretty well written, actually. I was really surprised the first time I watched this. That the male romantic interest is likable. The woman is actually pretty likable too, away from her desires for dead things. And the romance is actually well written and nice, and it sort of makes you invested in the characters as we go about the story. That being said, it's a lot slower than the first film, so people who watch the first one and wanted more of that, it's definitely a tone shift. There's much less nasty stuff in this one until pretty much the ending. It's much more story-focused rather than shock-focused on this one. That being said, the special effects, when they do show up, are rather good. The production overall is a fairly big step up from the first, and this pays off in some ways, and it doesn't pay off in others. It pays off because the film looks great. It feels very professional. It feels much more clean and mainstream than the first film, but it also loses a bit of its humor and its charm from the first, but it does feel like a relative step up from the first. I still prefer the first film, but there is definitely, this sort of marks a shift in Jörg Bucharest's filmmaking ability. And that's something that's going to carry on into his other two major films. They're much more streamlined, and they're less, I don't want to say shoddy, but they're certainly less rough around the edges, I'll say, than Nekromantik 1. And it's just an interesting thing to see how Jörg Bucharest sort of evolved as a filmmaker over these. The writing, you say what you want about the charm and style of the film, the writing in this is strictly better than the first. And I'm saying that as a huge fan of the first. The first one's one of my favorite films. I just think the writing on this one is much more tight, much less loose, and it still has a lot of nastiness at the end. Less nastiness overall than the first, but the ending of the second one really goes there, and sort of delivers on what you want as a fan of the first film. So I think this one's gonna, if you enjoyed the first, you'll probably enjoy the second, but if you enjoyed the first only for the reasons of the nastiness and the sort of silly, almost comedic nature of it, you might not enjoy this one as much. If you're looking for something, if you liked the idea of the first one with the nature of sex and death together, you'll enjoy this one. And if you have an open mind and you want something oddly more serious than the first, and you're looking for just a good horror, almost romance, gothic sort of B movie still, Nekromantik 2 is going to scratch that itch. I really enjoy this one as well. I'm a fan of all of Jürgen Bucharest's works, her major films. That's why I'm doing this series. And despite not returning to this one as much as the first one, I do still enjoy it, and I typically watch the first and second together. So, yeah. Out of the four Bucharest's, out of the four of his main movies, this is probably my least favorite. But that being said, it's still well worth a watch. And on a side note, the Blu-ray from Cult Epics is really great. Really, their releases of all four of Jürgen Bucharest's major movies are great. I can't speak to the quality of the Arrow video release because I don't have that one. I have the box set, but I don't have the individual release of it, so can't really do that. But the transfer, video quality, everything in this is crisp. The intros from Jürgen Bucharest on these are always entertaining, and it's nice to see sort of his providing a background for both the first and second movie, if you get them from Cult Epics. And yeah, definitely check it out if you're a fan of the first. If you're looking for something new, it's much less visceral than the first. It's still gross and the concept is weird and everything, but the writing is tight, the acting is good, the characters are likable for the most part for what they are. There's some funny moments still, but it's going to be much more serious than the first, but it's a good movie. I think these movies sometimes get written off by people outside of the extreme cinema community just because of their ideas, and yeah, I think they deserve a lot more attention. The next two reviews are going to be for films that still get even less attention than these outside of the community, which is another crying shame, because my favorite Jürgen Bucharest movie is going to be reviewed next. So, yeah. And I will gladly spoil that right now. My favorite is Der Todesking, and I'm going to be reviewing Shrum as part 4. Part 4 is also going to have my little Jürgen Bucharest collection update and everything there too, so keep an eye out for that. As always, I'm your host, Herschel Gillis, signing off for today. 0 thoughts, 0 editing, 0 brain cells. At the end here, I know I usually sign off here, but I am going to say one little announcement if you're watching this far into the video. It's going to be a new show on Saturdays called 5S, tentatively. That is Shock and Schlock Shitty Shark Saturdays. We're going to be reviewing every Saturday a terrible shark movie. And I'm going to be wearing a stupid mask, and we're going to have new art and everything for it. It's going to be fun. So keep an eye out for that as well. But Herschel Gillis signing off for today. Come back in a couple days. Going to be reviewing another video, or reviewing another Jürgen Bucharest film with Der Todesking. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks, guys.